All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to I think the fourth session of the job search series this year, which is the academic section chief career panel. As a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be sent out to all who have registered. So please make sure that you've registered for the session if you wish to receive the recorded link. We will also be intermittently throughout the chat sending out the post-session evaluation survey for those who have to log off early. We'll also show the QR code for the evaluation survey at the end of today's presentation. Anyone who fills out the survey will receive not only the chat text from today's session, but also any questions that we do not get to today, we'll ask our panelists to submit typed answers to, and we'll also send those out to all those who complete the survey. We have a great session today. We'll go on to the next slide. So moderators today is myself. I am Nicole Fernandez-Dias. I am the TECaN Education Chair, and my co-moderator today is Erin Bergner, who's an assistant professor at the University of Oklahoma and the Associate Fellowship Program Director there. Our first panelist is...
So our first panelist is Misty Good. So she comes from California originally, did a residency at the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Peoria, and fellowship at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. She's currently the section chief at UNC Chapel Hill. She does a wonderful research in basic and translational research in necrotizing enterocolitis. Also has interest in mentoring and fostering physician scientists, and fellow in early career faculty development.
Our second panelist today is Dr. Gutentag. She is originally from Philadelphia and then moved to San Antonio to complete her residency at Wilford Hall, followed by her fellowship at Boston's Children. She then did some service time with the Air Force in Japan, followed by a 20-year tenure at CHOP, where she became a tenured investigator as well as fellowship program director there. She's now moved to Nashville, where she is currently at the Vanderbilt University School of Medicine, Monroe Carell Jr. Children's Hospital as division chief. Her interests include neonatal lung disease, alveolar epithelial cell biology, surfactant, and the molecular origins of familial interstitial lung disease.
And then our last panelist is Dr. Trent Tipple. He comes originally from Indiana, did both his residency and fellowship at Nationwide Children's Hospital at The Ohio State University. He is currently the section chief at the University of Oklahoma. He is interested in redox biology, has a long-term research goal of developing novel approaches to preventing the development of BPD, and uses preclinical models to identify novel therapeutic approaches to activate endogenous antioxidant responses in premature infants, and is currently studying the genetic and metabolic contributions of the trace element selenium towards its antioxidant responses. Also has a great interest in early career faculty development as well.
Perfect. So will now enter the Q&A section of our session today. As a reminder, thank you everyone who submitted questions before the session. We'll try to get through as many as we can today during the live session. Panelists will ask about 1 to 2 panelists each question. If you have an additional answer, please feel free to use the chat function to chat out your additional response. Otherwise, we will move through. For our fellows or transitioning NEOs on the call today, if you have any burning questions, please feel free to throw those into the chat, or if you would like your question to be asked anonymously, please send them directly to either myself or Erin, and we'll slowly work them into the presentation. Any question that we don't get to today, we'll have our panelists type up answers to and send them out to anyone who completed the post-session evaluation. Perfect. Well, let's get started. Erin, if you'd like to go first.
All right, so we'll start out with just some questions on kind of your CV, cover letter preparation. I actually don't see Dr. Gutentag on the call quite yet, so I'll probably pinpoint one of you to answer first, and then the other one will answer after. And then if Dr. Gutentag is able to join us, then we'll probably do two of you to answer, and then the other one could put the other comments in the chat. So the first question is, when preparing a CV and cover letter, what should a candidate focus on in terms of marketing themselves for an academic position? And I will ask Dr. Good that question first, and then Trent, if you can afterwards.
Sure. I think the thing to know about your cover letter, it's really the first impression that a division chief or a search committee sees. And so it needs to tell in one page short story about who you are, what are your accomplishments, and what your career goals are. So I think if you just think about structuring it in 5 paragraphs, some of the best that I've seen are, you start out with saying where you're at currently and what type of position you're looking for. So that way they know, is this a clinician educator or physician scientist, like kind of right off the bat. And then next paragraph would be like where you did residency, and your accomplishments there. Next paragraph would be like fellowship, what you did in fellowship, and specifically the type of hospital you're at, level 4 NICU, how many deliveries, like kind of factual things, I would say, but then also what your scholar activity was and any accomplishments there. And then I like to see a little bit of a career plan, as far as like, it doesn't have to, we're not going to hold you to it, but at least we want to know you're thinking about it, like a 3 to 5 year plan. When I was a fellowship PD, we tried to make sure that our fellows were well prepared with their, 1 to 5 year plan. So I think that's important. And then just the last paragraph, obviously like thanking them for reading, but also like, why do you want to go to that program specifically? So it's nice, I'm at UNC now, so people will say, oh, I was at UNC for med school and I want to return to the area or something like that. So I think adding that personal touch, like why the place that you're sending your CV and cover letter to, I think is important. From a CV standpoint, you want to just make sure you highlight all the things that you've done. So I recommend that you keep that document as a living document. So every time you give a presentation, add that on, because you never know when you're going to forget. And 6 months down the line, you'll be trying to remember, when was that, grand rounds, or when was that, what was the title of that talk? I think doing it prospectively is easier. I don't know, I'll stop there, see what Trent has to say as well.
I think I'm going to echo many of the things that you said. We had a career development individual work with our section, and one of the things she talked about was this triangle of passion, skill, institutional need. And so as a leader, I'm seeking to understand and to ultimately convey what the needs I have for the section that I lead. And so if I can understand what drives you, what are your areas of passion, and what skills do you have, or the skills that you want to develop. And I think to Misty's point about that 3 to 5 year plan, oftentimes I'm following up with hey, I'm really interested. Maybe if you could articulate in about a half page where you see yourself headed in the next 3 to 5 years, and to really put a little bit more flesh on the bones of what's conveyed in a cover letter. But understanding the type of position, understanding, again, what are your passions, what drive you, and where have you come from? What is your background? We're human beings who need human interaction. As much as I love Zoom, like I love these talks when they're in person as well. And then I think it is important if you're somebody, for example, who needs a waiver eligible position. That's an important thing to understand up front, because there are some institutions that have those available. There are some that don't. And it might be that you have all the passion and skill in the world to fit a need that I have, but if I don't have a mechanism to be able to offer a position, those are things that we need to know up front, because it might be that I can help you and understand where those opportunities might lie, and then can be an ally and an advocate for you as well.
Excellent points. I think those are very helpful especially to an audience that suddenly finding themselves having to write a cover letter after never ever having to do that before. So the next question that we got was, and I'll direct this to Dr. Tipple first. How early should a candidate start looking for academic spots, and does that timeline change for a visa holder?
I would say by the late part of your second year, you should have an idea. Really maybe starting to think, where might I like to land? I live in a flyover state. I'm not near a coast like Misty. But that being said, understanding where you'd like to be geographically, what are the other priorities that you have, and starting to understand not only the type of position you're looking for, but what are those other pieces that are going to be part of making your life whole and holistic. And I would say as early as possible for somebody who knows that they need a J1 eligible position. I already know now, and this was a conversation an hour ago in our department chairs or division chiefs meeting with our department chair. And that is, they're already talking about J1 waiver allocations for the year after next. And so if I know I have a candidate or a faculty member coming to join us, for example, who ended up working for a year elsewhere, waiting for a position to open up to come and join us. And so these are important things that the earlier you have an idea of where you might like to be, the sooner you should reach out and make contact.
I agree with Trent. I think the sooner that you can recognize where it is that you are interested in, and certainly the ideal aspects of that would probably be pick 5 places, maybe in the spring of your second year that you really want to focus on, but then also, using PAS as a networking opportunity. So if you can identify those places, then you could potentially meet with division chiefs at PAS, ask a little bit more, do they think they're going to be hiring or not? The thing I would say in general, it depends on the budget, right? And so, do we have spots available will really depend on the budget. And sometimes it's not finalized by PAS, and sometimes it can take a while. So it may be a little bit early. So some places may not be able to tell you there's a spot or not. But I think you can never, start too early, but you also want to make sure that you look around and don't just jump at the first opportunity that falls into your lap. Because I would say, as a graduating fellow, there's a lot of people looking for jobs, there's a lot of competition, and there's not a match. So I know you guys are all used to matches, but at the same time, know that you're a great candidate and be yourself, when you're interviewing, but then also you will have to navigate competing offers eventually. So then, that's probably something, I don't know if that's on the list of things to discuss, but that may be an area of opportunity that we can talk about. But that is something that is real and is stressful when you're trying to navigate the job search.
Thank you. The next question we have is, and I'll direct this to Trent first, and I recognize that this is a little bit of a broad question, but what tips do you have for candidates for interviewing effectively in terms of the interview process?
I think having ideas for who you are and who you aspire to become. And I think as Misty indicated earlier, it's not like that, okay, in your review time, this is what you said in your cover letter. How are we doing? No, recognize that interests change, opportunities evolve and come, but have an idea for who you are and who you aspire to become, and be honest about what skills you have and what skills you'd like to develop. I mean, the truth is, it's one of the first times in your career where you're coming into a position that doesn't have a prescribed curriculum, where there isn't already a template that you're coming into. And so part of my job as a chief is to understand the aspirations of my faculty and to look for, and if not present, to create the opportunities to be able to augment skill. Because if I have a passionate individual who's capable of filling an institutional need but doesn't have the skill set fully developed, that's ideal for me. At the same time, I think as you're interviewing and being able to articulate who you aspire to become, it also helps. I've been in the situation where, okay, and actually as an applicant, I was in a situation where it became very clear that while I could have an offer for a position, what I aspired to become didn't align with the resources of the position I was interviewing for. And that chief was very honest with me and saying, I think you'd be better off to stay where you are and continue on the trajectory that you're on than taking a risk at interrupting that. And so if you're dealing with anyone with integrity, we'll all have that level of integrity to be honest with you, and to say, maybe this isn't the right fit, not because you're not a great person or a fantastic candidate, but I won't be able to support what you need and provide what you need to be what you aspire to become. And if that is ultimately going to leave somebody short, it's not a great situation, especially for as hard as everyone has worked to finally get to this point, to then come up short for what you aspire to be.
I agree. I think a lot goes into determining where it is that you want to interview. And then, towards what Trent was saying, I think you want to be sure that that is the right place for you. So just talking about interviewing effectively, you don't want to interview all around if it's a place that can't support your needs, for example. Like if you're, I'm a basic science researcher. So if I was trying to go to a place that didn't have infrastructure or support for basic science, that wouldn't set me up for success. So I think that's one of the things to keep in mind. I think as far as interviewing effectively, I think just be yourself. And a lot of times the first round is on Zoom. And so you guys should all be experts on Zoom now, but, making sure that, your environment is professional, when you're on Zoom, and treat it as a real interview. I would say, dress up and, make sure you're looking professional. And even though it's on Zoom and we're on Zoom every day, I think, recognizing that you want to put your best foot forward. And then also if it's an in-person interview, you want to, even if it's not an in-person interview, you want to make sure you really research the faculty, right? What are they known for? What are, that particular person that you'll get your itinerary with, are they a researcher? What are they excited about? What is the last paper they published? Get a sense of who they are. And that way you can steer your conversation. So you're not asking the same question kind of over and over to people, which for you want to have fun during your interview day, but just know that it's usually several days long, and you want to not be tired after 9 hours of Zoom interviews. So just things to keep in mind for that. Be prepared for sure.
Excellent, thank you. These next set of questions are about how chiefs go about selecting candidates to interview. So I'll start with this first group of questions, first to Dr. Good, followed by Dr. Tipple. So what are you looking for specifically in a new hire? Things that make a candidate stand out when you're reviewing their application? What are the most important kind of attributes or qualities you look for in a new graduate or a transferring NEO into your institution?
I think that's a good question. I think it depends on the type of position that I'm looking for. So right now, for example, we're looking for a clinician educator, and specifically, Trent was talking about, filling a void potentially in the division. And so, whether that's you have somebody leaving the institution that, is your POCUS expert or something like that, that can certainly play a role into like what we focus on. Or if there's a particular niche, for example, that needs to be filled, or we really need somebody that potentially wants to be a medical director, or potentially wants to be a program director. Those are things that I do try to tease out if people are interested in program leadership at all, or if maybe they're not, maybe they're interested in QI. I also think about things that all new grads are going to need mentorship of some kind. And while I'm happy to provide that, I think a team of mentors is really important. So what is the new grad interested in? And then do we have the mentorship team to support that? Because not all, there's good mentors and there's not good mentors. And some people mean well, but if they're not used to mentoring early career faculty, I think that doesn't set that faculty member up for success. So I think just we think about that broadly. How are we going to help you as division chiefs fulfill all of your goals? I think that's when I'm looking at a CV and a cover letter, those are the things that I'm looking at. And then as far as important attributes, I want to know what you've done in fellowship. So I'm maybe biased since I was a PD for a while, but I want to know what you've done. I want to know if you presented, what opportunities you've taken advantage of, because you do have a significant amount of protected time in fellowship, and how did you use that time most effectively? And I know with the pandemic, it's been hard, but even like virtual conferences, those are really important to present at, get your name out there. Even if, it may not be on your CV, but if you applied for something and didn't get it, like that's, nice to know. Did you apply for Marshall Clause and not get it? At least you tried or something. So those are all things I think about. I also look at, the type of environment, like were you in a level 4 or were you in a level 3? And, then how does that play into NICU here, and will you be set up for success?
So, and I'll build on that, but from a slightly different perspective. And I look at this as, part of my job is team building. And so what I want to understand is the capacity, capability, track record for harmony and collegiality. Are you a team player? Are you an inclusive leader? I'm very much focused, and Aaron can call me out if I'm speaking, if I'm not speaking honestly, but it's very important to me that we lead collectively as members of our team. Yes, we as physicians have specific roles, but in serving our patients and families and serving alongside other important stakeholders, how do you handle yourself? What was your experience as a fellow? Did you have opportunities to lead the team as a fellow? For example, that's something we've talked about even within our own fellowship program, because it's the first time when your name is going to be next to that patient's last name. You don't have the attending to fall back on, so to speak. And so what has that experience look like? There's a book that I really like as well called The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. And so there are 3 attributes that he talks about, and that is humble, hungry, and smart. And by smart, he means people smart. So what do I want to see? And who do I want to hire? I want to hire people who first are humble, and have, I think, and this really dovetails on what Misty said, and that is that hunger. What did you do with that time? Yeah, I can set expectations, but I love when people shatter the expectations that we set, not just try to meet them. And then lastly, the ability again to interact with other people in the team, to lead the team. That servant leadership, I think, is an important concept to me. And so that's the type of individual that I'm looking to bring into a lot of personalities, a lot of individuals as part of that team.
Trent, could I ask a follow-up question on that?
Sure.
And Misty as well? Sometimes we have fellows that have really good social IQ and are really good team players, but that's sometimes hard to convey genuinely in an interview. What are ways that applicants that for your programs have done that well or successfully?
I think references obviously help. This is a small community. And so the ability to reach back to a program director, to reach back to an attending within a program and be able to understand those more intangible qualities that, you're right, are very difficult to put into any sort of written form in a CV or a cover letter. And to say I'm the most humble person in my program in your cover letter, I'm not quite sure that conveys it either. But I would also say in that era of authenticity during an interview day, these are the sorts of things that you do pick up on during the course of the interview. When you're out to dinner with a group of people and the guard is down a little bit. It's hot here. Oklahoma is hot. And so in the summer, oftentimes when we're going to dinner in the evening, I'm not wearing a coat and tie. You don't need to either. We're likely going to sit outside. We're going to be a little bit warm, but we're going to lower a bit of the temperature to some degree. And that's when I think those natural personality traits start to show as well.
I agree. I think you just really want to be yourself. And if you can insert, a particular experience that can, show your humility, like if you can work that into the conversation, I think that's, sets you apart. Then if you're just on a Zoom and you're just answering questions, I think that's not going to put you in the best light. I think if you can then expand on it, like tell me about a time when, we don't have to ask that, but if you do tell us about a time when you led the team or, whatever it is, whether it's your pretending time and you talk about that, I think all that speaks to your clinical skills. And then also, how did you like, leading that team? I think that will come through when people start talking about it.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think, so this next kind of set of questions, we're gonna direct on, we're gonna be more focused on people that want to do more clinical and education work versus research work in academics. So I'll direct this first one to Trent. How does one apply for an academic job if they're mostly wanting to do clinical or education work?
I wouldn't say that there's any difference. Again, going back to that cover letter and really saying, here's who I am, here's the skill set I have or seek to develop, and here's where I want to go. I don't place even though my career path has been one of laboratory-based science, I don't place a particular emphasis on that over something different. And so, I actually look at what I really feel like, and Aaron's heard this ad nauseum now, but really have 4 pillars of academia. So there's clinical care, education, research, or what we term discovery and innovation, and advocacy and community engagement. I mean, that's a part that I really love about TECaN, that I really love about the generations coming up behind, is that embedded into that is this concept of advocacy and engagement of the community. And so that's a weakness in our program. That's an opportunity within our program. And so those are the types of areas that, from my perspective, they're equally important, because to serve patients and families at the highest level, you need to be excellent in all of them.
I was typing in the chat. I think as far as, like I said, the cover letter, just be sure that you say what it is that you want. I think by saying, the majority of fellows coming out are really interested in being a clinician educator, and embrace that. And that's who you are. And we need outstanding clinician educators. They're educating the next generation. I mean, I'm saying this as a researcher, I definitely need to have a great team of educators, because you can't be in the lab and, doing administrative work and being on service and educating, all the time. So I think knowing that, and certainly even knowing a division chief who may be a researcher, we have to have respect for all the different branches, so to speak, or fields, or subfields within neonatology. I think that's of critical importance. So I wouldn't be afraid if you have somebody like me who does basic science all the time. We know that we appreciate you and we need you in our division.
Sure. Thank you guys for those answers. And I can vouch for Trent. He does start every faculty meeting with all those pillars. So I've heard them multiple times, and I think that's true in academia, that we definitely need all of our counterparts to make a functioning section, for sure. So the next question I'll direct over to Misty. How does the interview day for a clinical position differ from that of a research position?
I would say, from my standpoint, it's similar in that I still want, whoever the candidate is, whatever their interests are, I want them to meet with all of our faculty so they get a sense of, the team that they're joining. But then also, if they are interested in, whatever they're interested in, if they're interested in research, whatever type of research, it's my job to really make sure that I build them an itinerary so they know who could potentially be their mentors when they're here. Now, somebody that's on the clinician educator pathway is still going to also need mentorships. And so maybe that is inside the division, maybe it's outside of the division. It really depends on their interests. So, from my standpoint, it's about the same. I would say that if somebody's fresh out of fellowship and looking for a physician scientist position, that's going to probably take a little bit longer in that, in-person interview time, just to match them with mentors, right? And so when I was a PD, we used to have a whole day where we would have our fellows interview mentors that we pre-vetted basically. And so it's the same type of process, and that can take a little, can take an extra day perhaps. And so I think just recognizing that it may be a little bit longer interview, that's really, from my standpoint, that's the only difference.
And I would build upon that. Maybe there would be a little more legwork up front for that research-based interview, and that we'd be vetting, to Misty's point. If we can have a clearer understanding of the type of mentorship team that would need to be built around a research-based faculty member. I'm sitting in the middle of a campus with 7 professional schools. And so one of the things we've really focused on in the 2.5 years since I arrived is building those relationships
I would just add to that, when it comes to giving a talk, we have both physician scientists and our clinician educators, really any of our faculty, give a talk. So, you know, whatever it is that you want to talk about, whether it's, you know, what your scholarly activities on, whether it's whatever type of research, etc., we have them give a talk. That way they get comfortable presenting to our group and, you know, see how they handle questions, you know, under a higher pressure environment, I guess, when they're nervous. But we don't make them give a chalk talk. That's it's a little bit much, Trent.
Excellent, thank you. These next set of questions I will direct to both Dr. Good and Dr. Tipple and are more kind of research in academia based. So the first one, which I'll let Dr. Good speak to first, how detailed of a research career plan should you have when applying for academic positions?
I don't think you need to have a real in-depth research plan. I think, you know, when you think about your career as a researcher, it's pretty planned out for you already. You know, you need to find a mentor, you need to publish a paper or multiple papers, then you need to apply for a K award, then, you know, you need to transition and get an R01. I think it's pretty, you know, specified already for you. I do think, you know, with regards to what it is that you're interested in and who potential mentors, for example, you know, we talked about the cover letter at the beginning. I think it's really important to highlight, you know, that if you want to be a physician scientist, that you say that, and, you know, if you want protected time, that you say that, but also understanding that in order to be a physician scientist and get a K, you really need 75% protected time. So if you said something like, I just want, you know, 40 to 50% protected time, that really doesn't set you up for success at the NIH level. The other thing to know when you're applying for a research career position is some programs will have K-12s. And so that is an institutional K award that you can go on for 2 to 3 years, and that protects your or pays your salary and really protects your time. They're usually awarded to the department chairs. There's not that many of them, so it's not like every program has one. But those are important to look for if you know, if you're looking for a way to protect your time. One of the fellows that was in my lab, we applied for an F-32 for her, so that way she could kind of be guaranteed a faculty position. So that's something, depending on what stage you are, that you could do if there's second years, like, you know, or rising second years. That's something you can consider, because that will, you know, set you up for success. But I don't think you really need a detailed career plan. I do think that you need to say the words like you want to be unfunded, you know, whether it's R01 funded, independent investigator, long term. I think you should say that in there. And you should, you know, in order to do that, you're going to need to apply for a K award.
Anything to add, Dr. Tipple?
I think I'll dovetail on what Misty said, and I think showing that you have a working knowledge of the process and the sequence of events that occurs toward having that independence and what that looks like. But I think also having at least some degree of awareness, not a total granular level, but at some degree of awareness of the types of resources that one would need, time being the most precious of those resources, but then institutional support, both within what you might be given as part of a startup, for example, as well as foundation. She spoke about K-12 types of resources, so institutional grant funding for which you may be competitively able to access. We're in an underrepresented state, more or less, when it comes to federal research. And so there are mechanisms within our state called COBRAs, Centers of Biomedical Research Excellence, which are R01 equivalent types of research opportunities that aren't available in every state. And I actually see that as a strength for some of our junior faculty to be able to access those opportunities to bridge. And so I think, again, at the first level, having a general idea and a knowledge of the timeline is going to be important. And there is no one size fits all approach. Just like those mentorship teams, being able to also understand how to incorporate life events into this trajectory and timeline as well is going to be really important. I see you, Dr. Gutentag, as well. Hello. Oh.
Howdy.
Thank you for joining us on during the middle of service. We really appreciate it and realize it's a big ask. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
Well, perfect timing and perfect segue. So the next set of questions we were going to talk about was just kind of general stuff around promotion. So Dr. Gutentag, can you comment on the different experiences and academic practices relating to promotion? And then specifically how to maybe ask those questions in the interview day?
Sure. So when I was at Penn, I participated in a School of Medicine-wide examination of the promotion expectations. And so as part of that, I had the opportunity to work with a group of people, and we reached out to different academic centers. And the one unifying theme around the academic paths to promotion is that each center did something a little bit different. So you cannot, yeah, exactly. You cannot go into this expecting that what you may have learned about at your own institution may be widely transferable to the institutions that you're applying to. So I think that be curious, be open to learning about what is possible, and preferably be curious before you actually start the interview process. If you've got geographic restrictions for where you might be applying for a position, make sure that you're looking for the School of Medicine faculty handbook, which should be accessible to you through internet searching, to get an idea of what tracks, how many tracks, and what tracks and what the expectations of those tracks are. That should be very well spelled out in the School of Medicine faculty handbook. And I think that whereas you may want additional information during your interview about how the School of Medicine operationalizes that, I think it says a lot when somebody comes in and sits down across a table from me and says, wow, I see that you have 3 tracks. I think I understand a physician scientist track, but tell me how Vanderbilt approaches the clinical practice track versus what the clinician educator track. What distinguishes one from the other?
Excellent, thank you. And I agree, it's a wide variety across institutions. So those were some wonderful resources that you pointed out to try to pinpoint that. Trent, anything to add to that?
No, I think Susan covered it really well. I often will supply that faculty handbook, those promotion criteria, during the course of that vetting and interview process. It is easy now, and in any move that I've made, this is the third institution in which I've worked, and I thoroughly understood those before I ever started looking, because once you have accomplishments in your career, you want to understand how those accomplishments translate from one institution to the next, because even that is not the same. And so the question I would probably focus on more so is, how are we going to work together so that the products that I produce as a productive faculty member will support my promotion and my movement along that continuum. I'm very big on being intentional with the work we do, and the byproduct being the commodities for promotion, not a checklist and boxes, and so that we dictate our time based on trying to meet a checklist. Now, if we align your passion, skill, and institutional need, the products that come from that should support your promotion. And if you have a living CV, to reach back to something that Misty said earlier, and you're documenting each of those activities, it's going to be very straightforward when we sit down at 5 years, which is the first time at which you can be considered for promotion here at the University of Oklahoma, that all of that information is there when I have you run your dossier for the first time, and the information's already there.
The only thing I would add to that is, as somebody that went through a very long assistant professor process, is just make sure that you're doing things that are going to get you promoted if you're on a physician scientist or investigator track. I think getting leadership positions that aren't necessarily going to help you, and they're not publications and grants, which is really what you're judged so heavily on. I think recognizing that. The other thing is, if you move institutions, you may be on one path, and then you got to really conform to your new institution's guidelines, as Susan was saying. So knowing that before you go, I think, is critical, and negotiating that potentially if you're moving like early to mid-career, because you want to make sure that that's spelled out. Like, if you're on the tenure track, is your clock still on? If likely it is. If so, how many years do you have to get an R1? Because depending on what institution you're at, that timeline is going to be different, and potentially very stressful for you if it's one of those institutions that's like 7 years, get a R1 up and out. So they're not all like that, but you should know that that does exist. So
excellent. Thank you so much for all of those points. The next set of questions is more on mentorship and leadership. I will direct this first to Dr. Good, followed by Dr. Gutentag. For a new graduate or junior faculty in academics, is it better to join an academic center that has great leadership opportunities, but maybe not a lot of mentor opportunity, versus a place that is very established in your interest field, but might be difficult to establish your own niche? And along the same lines, how do you ask the question about mentor availability within an interview?
I think, like we talked about mentorship, I would make sure that as the division chief is putting your itinerary together, that you're just clear with us about, if you've identified potential mentors, even if you can't see a niche for yourself. I mean, all mentors should actually be able to carve out a niche for you if they're interested in taking you on as a mentee, or if they're interested on, training the next generation. That's really our job as mentors, whatever it is, like whatever type of niche it is. So I think recognizing that, so even though you may not be able to tell from the website or the CV or anything like that, that they would be able to carve something out for you, I think just letting us know, I'm really interested in these 3 people, and then we can vet them before your interview, and invite them to be on your itinerary. But then also when you're meeting with them, you could ask a hypothetical question. If I came into your research group, or if you were my mentor, what do you see as, because you have to basically build your independence, right? So from a research standpoint, you want to make sure that you can do that and stay at the same institution. And so what do you see as, or have you thought about, or I'm really interested in this, what do you think? What do you think about that? And would you be able to mentor me in that regard? Like if somebody came to me, and I have had people come to me and say, I want to do neck and the brain and things like that, I'm not really the right mentor for that. I'm not a neuro investigator. I'm not even interested in the gut brain axis. So like I would tell them up front, but like we can get them another collaborator. Like I can mentor them in neck, but perhaps there's a great co-mentor for them that we could work together to help this early career faculty member.
I think Misty brings up a great point. The days of one mentor filling all of someone's needs academically are really gone. I think you're doing yourself a disservice by looking for one-stop shopping in mentorship, and that goes for not only physician scientists but clinician educators and what we call here the clinical practice faculty. I think that they're just like you learn differently you learn something different from each kind of mentor that you have. It increases your ability to flex as you're starting to establish yourself in a niche. If you're interested in working in the fetal center and growing to learn how to manage a complex multidisciplinary fetal center with obstetrical colleagues and surgical colleagues and subspecialists, then you would be it would be totally in your wheelhouse to look to the neonatologist who is the most engaged in that domain to be your primary mentor. But I think you would do well to seek out mentorship broadly from different subspecialists who are engaged in that area. If there is no primary mentorship in the division of neonatology for the area that you're interested in, then again, you would do well to seek out a team of mentors to help you move your career forward. I think that the thing that dismays me the most is when people come in with great ideas, but as I'm sitting and talking with them, don't display any motivation to have looked for possible mentors before they even came on campus, because I think that's a real missed opportunity. You may come up with a mentor who's a real clunker. You don't know that until we sit down and actually engage in a give and take. And you may not have, you may not have found the person who I know is ideal in my institution for your academic niche. But that's okay. We all bring something different to the table, and it's building that trust through the interview process that I have your best interests at heart and you have deep interest in my institution, my faculty, and faculty beyond the Division of Neonatology.
Excellent points, thank you. Our next set of questions relates more to the transition into facultyhood. So I'll direct this first question to Dr. Tipple and then to Dr. Gutentag. It's appropriate that this actually comes from your junior faculty member here to Trent. So how do you know that your division chief is supportive of your junior faculty?
Aaron, yeah, no. No, but I actually ask. For example, our faculty has grown fairly substantially over the last couple of years with inbound faculty coming, and so ask, what was the process for onboarding? Are there things that could have been handled better? What was the biggest challenge when you were onboarding into your position? And likely you're going to hear credentialing, because that's a challenge most everywhere. But direct questions. This goes back to that authenticity piece, and I think really asking the faculty, you're making a significant decision and potentially a huge investment of life trajectory alteration based upon this. And so if you need to understand, really, this is an integrity piece for the leader that you're going to go work with. And ultimately and I like that Susan really did lay that emphasis, and we as leaders it's our job to support your success. And so you'll likely get a flavor overall of the general happiness or dissatisfaction of the faculty. You can't, in order to have, and it's my job to give a broad representation and exposure of a candidate to our faculty, you don't hide faculty. And so you're going to have some idea. And to some degree, I hope that there's a wart or two that does show. If you go in and everybody just sings praises and doesn't have anything they feel like needs improved, then there's likely you're not getting an accurate picture of the overall organization or that leader. We are human beings, and so while we do our level best to accomplish and support everyone, we likely fall short, just as we do as parents or spouses or in other aspects of our lives.
So I've reimagined my job as division chief as being an investment banker. I am interested in bringing in people who are going to do great things and provide a return on investment, whether that's an actual dollar investment or whether that's a blood, sweat, and tears investment. It takes a lot to go out there, advertise for the position, articulate that appropriately, do all of the pre-screening that leads to interviews, and to get through an interview process and a negotiation process to successfully sign somebody onto one's faculty. You don't take that investment lightly. I'm not going to bring somebody on and say, well, if it doesn't work out, we'll just, rehire into that job a year from now. That's dumb. So please understand that all of us want a good fit and a long-term fit for someone. That's what we are dearly hoping for. So I go back to this issue of trust. You have to trust that we're not looking for checker pieces to populate our checkerboard of neonatology. We are looking for human beings that we hope will grow in our institution to be the best that they can be, and to, make us look really brilliant for hiring you. Okay. We really want people to be happy in what they're doing and successful. So just recognize that we're in this for the long haul with you. And if, and that means that there's responsibility on our part, but there's also responsibility on your part. in developing that relationship so that you get what you need to be successful. That may be clear during the negotiation process. That may not be clear until you get 6, 8, 12 months into the job and realize, you know, I really should have asked for fill in the blank. Okay. You need to understand, and through the interview process and through the onboarding process, figure out what your avenues of, you know, what are the paths to getting what you need that you may not have thought of previously. I can't know what I don't know. So I rely on my faculty to clue me in that we might have missed something.
That's an excellent
Okay.
segue into the next group of questions. As a reminder, we'll have a session completely dedicated to contract negotiation and managing multiple offers in October for those of you who are interested. But just one quick question regarding contract negotiation or position negotiation. I'll direct this first to Dr. Gutentag, followed by Dr. Good. But how does a candidate best go about negotiating for protected time to prepare for boards, enroll in things like graduate programs, sabbaticals, etc.?
I think the best way is, is to think about me as an investment banker. If you were, starting a startup and you needed funding to be able to build a business, you would have a business plan. And that business plan would involve, I think I need something from column A that is going to enable me to do something in column B. And as a result of that, and oh gosh, I'm running low on battery on my computer. It's just been one of those kind of days. And as a result, if I can take my talents in column A, apply them in column B, then I expect that within 1, 2, 5, 10 years, I'm going to be able to do this for you and to improve this program, that apply for that grant, and make you, Dr. Division Chief, look brilliant. And that's kind of tongue in cheek, but it really does come down to, is there a good reason to think that my investment in you is going to achieve what you're hoping to achieve? And is that going to be good for the division? Because the money that I invest in your goals and aspirations are coming from a pot that you share with all of your other faculty colleagues. Does that make sense?
Definitely makes sense.
Okay.
To dovetail onto that, I would say for protected time for boards, just ask, right? Like, you can have some time, like we can put you on service early, you can have a break. Just ask that. Don't be afraid to ask. You're not going to be, taking a ton of vacation when you're trying to study anyways. You should probably have reports. You definitely want vacation, but I think just ask. When it comes to graduate programs, just check out the website, check out the faculty, perks of the institution, and do they give, free enrollment in graduate programs, or does it cost, or does the division support that, or is it supported at the departmental level? But just to dovetail on what Susan was saying, I think when you're thinking about protected time, you want to have something to show for it. So what does that look like for you? So when somebody says, I want 50% protected time, I say, okay, what do you want to do with the 50%? Because for me, when I'm, an NIH funded investigator, 50% doesn't do a whole lot for you. It doesn't give you a K award. It doesn't set you up for success. So I have to then question your priorities and ask why 50%? And then we have to, discuss that. I do think, from a protected time standpoint, you also want to surround yourself with mentors and, success, right? So somebody who's successful in one arena may not always be successful in another arena. And so find those people that have the success that you may want to have in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, and then learn from them and ask them, ask in your interview, how, if you had to go back and negotiate something for your first job, what would you have done differently, and see what they say. And sometimes that's moving expenses, sometimes it's less service time the first year or something. And just, I would ask people, because you never know until you negotiate.
Yeah, I think we're all I would hope that we're all as interested in transparency. But my notion of transparency may be different from your notion of transparency. So I will lay things out on the table that I think to lay out on the table. Please don't be afraid to speak up if I haven't hit the one thing that is going to be most important to you.
Thank you. So this is we're running out of time, so this is our last question here, and I'll actually direct it at all three of you. But while we do that, just want to direct everyone that's participating to the chat that Nicole put a link to the post-session evaluation, so please fill that out so we can get your feedback on that. So the question is, and I'll direct it first to Dr. Gutentag to hopefully optimize your computer battery lifetime, then to Dr. Good, and then finally to Dr. Tipple. So what is one thing that you wish all applicants knew?
That I am not a scary person, that I am actually really approachable, and that I want to be approachable, because I really do think that this is you need two people to negotiate, and we need to work together. So if I am interested enough to invite you to come to interview at Vanderbilt, I really want this to be a conversation and not a monologue.
I agree. I think just understanding that we took this division chief job really to help support early career faculty and faculty development. And I think that was one of the most frustrating things when I was a fellowship PD, is you pour all these career development resources, and you for 3 years you're nurturing as you go along in fellowship, and then it's you hand them over to a division chief who may be really busy, and they text you, this wasn't the right place for me, or something like that, and that is painful. So for me, when I was thinking about should I take a division chief job this kind of early in my career or not, one of the things that really played in was how am I going to impact the next generation, and how can I help them, and how can I foster people's career development, not just as a physician scientist, which I was doing already, but really in every domain. And I think that's what's important, because we have such a privilege and honor of taking care of our babies and our families, and remembering that and keeping people humble in that regard. I really wanted to be that type of cheerleader for the division, and fill our spots with people that are on the same type of have the same type of mentality and shared mental model, about taking exceptional care of babies. I'll stop there for Trent.
I think that there's no perfect. I mean, there's no perfect faculty candidate. There's no perfect job. Life is a series of trade-offs and choices that one must make. And your interests evolve. You would like to be, I'd like to see, for me personally, somebody end up in a position where they can never stop evolving as they're exposed to more and more aspects of professional and personal life. And I'm going to dovetail on what Misty said as well. And my personal mission statement is maximize impact. And so I became a chief because I thoroughly enjoy having the ability to impact other people's lives, and in turn, then their ability to impact further down the line. And so then that's not just maximizing impact in the professional space, that's in the personal space as well. And so one of the things we talked about very early on when I started in this role was about work-life integration, not work-life balance. And so that's another important piece to this as well. And so you're looking for perhaps the perfect place with the perfect opportunity, with the perfect mentors, with the perfect home, on the perfect street, with the perfect schools and the perfect 2.5 children. The reality is there's likely going to have to be some give and take in all of this. But if you go into it eyes wide open, trusting your partner in the process, which is what we are as chiefs, the ability to look back 10 years later and feel like I made an impact in the lives of those in my personal life and those in my professional life, we'll all feel good about the journey.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists for taking the time and answering a lot of our questions today, and to my co-moderator, Erin, for joining me. As a reminder, we have recorded this session and we'll send it out to everyone who registered. We are getting a lot of hits on our YouTube channel with these sessions. They've proved very helpful, and we've been getting great comments and feedback. So thank you guys for participating today. We will, on the QR code that you see on your screen is the QR code for the post-session evaluation survey. Please fill that out and we'll send out the chat text and any questions that we did not get to today. Our panelists will type up answers for, and we'll send those out as well. We are over halfway through our job search series with 3 more to go, next of which will be on June 28th with the job hunting with Visa didactic and career panel. The diversity, equity, inclusion career panel is still in planning stages and still needs to be determined what date and time. And then lastly, our last didactic is the one that focuses specifically on contract negotiation and job offers, and that's in October. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.